We are up to the Mem Hey Amid Aleph, the Mishnah, and we're continuing the process of a Nazir concluding his Naziris. So remember, we have somebody who's Tameh. If middle of the Naziris, they become Tameh. So they have to then set aside 7 days and they go through the Tara. They then give themselves a haircut. They bring certain karbonis, and then they start, they start all over again in the Naziris. That's called Taglachas Tumah. And then you have an ordinary Nazir, let's say 30-day term, and then they have to give some haircut. The 3 karbanas called Taglachas Tara. So what's the process? Says the Mishnah. Taglachas Tara, Kate said, how does it work? Maybe Gimel Behemis. They bring 3 animals, a Chatas, an Oila, and a Shlamim. If they become Tameh, the animals they bring in, there is a Chatas, an Oila, and they bring an Oila and a Shlamim and an Osham. An Osham because they were Tameh. Here, they bring a Chatas, an Oila, and Shlamim. The sheichet es hashlamim, they shecht the carbon shlamim, and only then umegaleach aleim divrei Rabbi Yehuda, and then they give themselves the haircut. Now, in the Torah, the order of the animals are chatas oila shlamim, and here he says you take your haircut after the shlamim. So there's a big argument in how to learn pshat here. Most of the Shayim seem to learn pshat. So even though the pasuk says shlamim last, you bring the shlamim first. Even after one carbon, he gives a haircut, and then Teja remains with the question. So how come the Torah gives a different order? And the Torah says chatas oila shlamim, and you're telling me that you can bring the shlamim first and give yourself a haircut. But others learn that actually what he means exactly that. You have to wait till you bring your 3rd carbon. The shlamim is last, and you don't give yourself a haircut till you bring up all your karbanos. That's later. We'll do that later. That's afterwards.
That was before they made the carbon.
No, that's before they're cooking the carbon. Okay, Divi Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Eliezer says, that they know they give themselves a haircut after carbon chatas, and the chatas should be the first animal you bring. Chatas kadem is b'chamakum. The chatas generally is always brought up first before the oila. So therefore, you bring, the haircut comes after the chatas, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, the haircut comes after the shlamim. What happens with im gil? That's how it should be. What happens with im gil? The fact is, you gave yourself a haircut after any of these kabbanas, then yatsa. With 1 carbon, any carbon, but the evidence is all right. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says, usually when you set aside an animal, you have to nominate what carbon this is. So what about if you set aside an animal for Naziris, but there are 3 animals and 3 carbonas, and you didn't nominate what's what? So is that, do they become kodesh or not? If you set aside 3 animals, you didn't specify. It doesn't matter, because in this one here, it's obvious what's what. The oil is one particular carbon, and for example, the oil has to be male. The chatas has to be female, and the shlamim has to be a ram. So you can have a male, female, and ram. So we obviously know which carbon, which animals for which carbon. So it doesn't matter if you didn't, formally nominate which animals what. Each animal, whichever is suitable, that's what it becomes. We learn. In the actual pasuk, the reading of the pasuk, it says as follows. It says, "V'gilach hanazir." Where should this is how you normally translate. Where should the nazir take his haircut? Pesach oil moed, at the entrance of the oil moed. It sounds like wherever the nazir is, he has to make a trip to the Beis Hamikdash and the haircut part, and stand by the oil moed, stand by the mishkan, stand in the Beis Hamikdash, and there he should go take his haircut. And then you take the hair, and you, as Yimi was pointing out, then you take it, and you send it off so that you can cook it. We'll talk about it soon. And you cook it. You put it in the fire, place the fire under the shlamim, and you're cooking. Bishlamim. So we learn it from here actually that bishlamim akasim adaber. The word Pesach Hayomayid is not a place. Yes. It's the carbon that the Torah insists that you have to bring it up Pesach Hayomayid, that you have to bring it there, and that's the carbon we're talking about. Why? The only carbon the Torah requires, Pesach oil moed, is only by shlamim. Because it's a gift, you have to bring it to the doorway of the oil moed. It says by the carbon shlamim, it says, when should you shecht it? Pesach oil moed. The Torah says Pesach oil moed regarding shlamim means when do you bring the shlamim? Only after the doors open, only the gates open during the day. But where does the Torah reference the word Pesach oil moed? Only the carbon shlamim. So which carbon by Nazir? When it says you should take a haircut, it doesn't mean take a haircut there physically. There, it means do it after the carbon shlamim. After the carbon that I said I referred to, Pesach, I associate Pesach Moed. You're telling me that means after Karm Shlamim, like the first opinion on Mishnah. Maybe literally means that you have to stand by the Pesach HaMoed and give yourself a haircut. So who it can't be. We don't. It's insulting for the base of Mikdash. You get a barber standing there by the entrance to the base of Mikdash and giving people haircuts. So it's a different, even though it's a mitzvah. So because it's insulting, it's obviously not this. It wasn't trying to be Pesach HaMoed. It doesn't mean that the haircut should be there, but it means after the carbon that the Torah associates with Pesach HaMoed. Rabbi Yeshua says, no. For bezoyin ain't it tzarich. I don't have to say that the reason why you don't take a haircut is over there is because it's bezoyin. We know anyway it's a bezoyin. And what's that? We know anyway, and I'll do anything insulting to the base of Mikdash. And where do you learn it from? From the following. The Torah says, when the kohen goes up, you shouldn't have any steps. There should be a ramp to the Mizbech and no steps. And why not? Because when you take steps, you have to lift your foot. And when you lift your foot, you might expose yourself under your pants. Now who sees it? The only one who'll see it is the steps, is concrete, or whatever it is underneath you. And it's a daimim, it's an inanimate object. And it's to teach us. It's just like we say, you don't make a bracha, as it says, you have to cover the challah. One of the three reasons given on Shabbos is because really the bracha of hamaitzi should take precedence over the bracha of wine. But we make a bracha of wine first, so not to insult the bread, we cover the bread. When bread gets insulted, it has sensitivities. We're talking about something which is inanimate. And yet, it's not to teach, it's not from the bread, it's to teach us how sensitive we should be to what's around us, that we should always be aware and conscious of what's going on around us, and we shouldn't do anything to offend anyone else. Same thing about the Kohen Mizbech. So I don't need you to tell me that the Nazir doesn't take a haircut. Of course doesn't take a haircut, it's insulting. Surely to do something which is bezayin, over there the Kohen is going to do his service. And nobody else sees. Here, you're not going to do any service, and everybody sees. You're standing there exposed, taking a haircut. This is very interesting. The Gemara brings here nusach achad b'medrash parshas Nazir. There's slightly different nusach. You never see that. It's another nusach. Same idea. In fact, the Mepharshim have a hard time understanding the difference between the two nuschos. But basically, there it says begilach hanazir. Rabbi Yeshua says. He just adds, Rabbi Yeshua is the one who said the shlamim because of that. After the shlamim, that's when give a haircut. Why? Maybe it means you should have to do it there because it's bezoin. Surely it can't mean you should take a haircut. It's a bezoin. There's no difference. Yeah.
To see a quote of a method, something with a
yeah. Exactly. Rabbi Yitzchak says no. I know anyway you cannot take a haircut by the entrance base of Mikdash. How do I know that? It says in Pasuk, what do you do with the hair? After you give us a haircut by the Pesach HaMoed, it says there, you take the hair and you place it with so you take the hair from this Nazir, and what do you do with it? You place it directly on the fire. It sounds like you're standing right next to that room. There's a room, the chamber on the when you walk in the base of Mikdash on your left side, immediate left side, which is the south, the south east corner, right on your left side there. That's where that's where you did you took your shlamim, and that's where you took your haircut. Right there. And not in the prominent place in the entrance where everybody has to walk through and see what you're doing. And so it sounds like you take a haircut right next to where you're cooking your shlamim. The locker side is you have misha and you take a haircut and right there you place it in the fire. But if you're going to be standing all the way there by the entrance to the base of Mikdash, then you have to do a few steps. You have to take the hair, then you have to transport it from one end of the courtyard to the other, then put it in the fire. That's how I know that you don't take a haircut by the door, not because it's a bezoin, but because the Torah is clear, you have to be standing next to the fire. Others say, or at least that's ideal. Others say, I know we're talking about a karm shlamim. How do I know that? Not because what you said Pesach HaMoed, which is the pasuk associated with shlamim, but maybe it means literally take a haircut by the doorway. Again, this ikad is exactly the same. It's really no different than what we just said. The same idea that you have to take a haircut and bring it over. But this ikad is that Yitzchak saying the whole thing. Not that the Gemara says one thing. When Yitzchak came along and he saying the whole thing. What? He comes along and says that's how we know it's a shlamim. It says the locker salvation is a there. Where did you take your haircut? Right next to the place where you cooked the shlamim and where you placed your hair. What do we do with the words Pesach HaMoed that you should take a haircut Pesach HaMoed? You said it means do it after the Karm Shlamim. I say we learn something else from there. And in fact, this is how we accommodate the view of Rabbi Lazar, who says that it was after the Chatzos the haircut. He said, you know what Pesach means? The time. When should you take a haircut? Can you do it at night? Coles man ain't Pesach you can only take a haircut while the front entrance of the base of Mikdash is open, which is only during the day, but not at night. That's what we use the pasuk El Pesach. It's come to your time. Time. Rab Shimon says, no, we learned the Gila Chanozip. It's written in masculine. Only Nazir. What? That only a male gets a haircut in the courtyard, and not a female. Why not a female? Shema yizgada b'prichikuna. If her hair is exposed and then they take a haircut there in public, could be that the young kohanim will have lewd thoughts.
Who's giving the haircut? Is it one of the kohanim?
It doesn't say anywhere it has to be a kohen. I'm sure wherever they put up there, somebody that maybe put up there someone who's blind, can't see anything.
Most women with their hair shaved off and guns, they're not going to be.
No, but this is before.
She comes in and uncovers it.
Yeah, you have to. So if you're telling me that we're worried about exposure and people having lewd thoughts, so how come we can learn the next Masechta, the Saita, they would bring her and they would, they would, and her hair as well, they would expose her hair. The same hair that you're worried about in the Zira, by the Saita, you do the same thing. The Chsiv said, you place it there in front of Hashem, everybody's watching. We're not worried. Somebody's got about Pichikuna that maybe they'll have lewd thoughts. What are you comparing? Zu, in this case here, when she comes out in public, she didn't do anything wrong, she's in a zero, she infected, she's a saintly woman, she makes herself up, she beautifies herself, she goes out in public. So therefore we're worried about people having lewd thoughts. So why have the haircut in public? By the side, on the contrary, we humiliate her in public and we say this is what happens. We don't do. We turn on black. We'll see it in rope and all that.
So we sent two kohanim.
That's when you leave out the rope.
So that she shouldn't be alone with one.
Yeah. Says the Gemara. Next mission. Okay, now what happens to the hair? They would take the hair from the head of the Nazir. They would send it off under the pot that they used to cook the Karm Shlamim. They would put the hair there in the fire, and that's what they did with all the hair from the Nazir.
It's the only carbon which gets boiled.
No, every time you do a Shlamim, what do you do with the meat? Shlamim.
I don't know. Isn't it roasted on fire?
Doesn't have to be only Karm Pesach. No, the parts that go to the Mizbech, but the parts that you eat for yourself, you do whatever you want with it. The only time is that you have laws, grilled, not cooked, and all that is Karm Pesach. Okay. So that's if the Nazir was in Yerushalayim. If he lived, let's say, out in the country in Israel, he would send his kabbanis. According to this Mishnah, the only time that the Nazir would send his hair to cook it and place it under the carbon was if he was in Yerushalayim. But if he lived outside Yerushalayim, or even or let's say he was the other kind of haircut, which he became tameh, and then he had to take a haircut. That hair, I don't care where he lived, Yerushalayim or outside Yerushalayim, they would not put in the fire. They would not put it in the fire. Okay, so according to the first opinion of the Mishnah, the only one who sent his hair to be cooked in the base of Mikdash was the Nazir Tar who lived in Yerushalayim.
So not every Nazir had to come to the base of Mikdash for his time.
You could send his kabbanos. What Tara? They would send around the whole Etzisrael. Tumah. Tara, Tumah. Tara is nothing Tara. All you do is kabbanos, you can send his kabbanos. And even though it says you should wave with the hand and everything else, but if you're there. That's only the mitzvah. It's called shiuri mitzvah, leftovers. Rameir says, "Hakom mishalchin tachadei." He says, no, everybody would send their hair. The only one who wouldn't is if you're tameh and live outside Yerushalayim. Chutz tameh shebedin bavad. If you were tameh and outside Yerushalayim, then you wouldn't send your hair. Says the Gemara that she took the hair of the Nazir. We learned it's one more step that our mission doesn't mention, and that is what did they do with the hair? This is what they do. They would boil up the shlamim, and the gravy of the shlamim, they would pour the noisin asar rosh nizar. They would pour the gravy of the shlamim. You know, as part of the shlamim was mixed into the hair, and then then they put it in the fire. I guess it would sizzle away and everything else. Yeah, okay, yeah, a big fire there. But the idea was we wanted part of the shlamim to be mixed into the hair of the nazir. So and we'll soon see how we know that. What happens if they sent it not by the shlamim, they sent it to cook with the chatas and the asham, because the kohen would eat part of the chatas or the asham, and yatsa, you still yatsa. So even though ideally it should be under the shlamim, but if you put it under the other kabbanas, now the Gemara have a problem. A nazir, if he brings a chatas, he doesn't bring an asham. A chatas is only if you were a taradik nazir, the end of 30 days you bring a chatas. An asham is if you were a tamadik, it became tameh, you bring an asham. So what do you mean under the chatas and the asham? Yeah, it says the Gemara, asham ben nazir Torah mi'ika. Where does an asham come into the picture? Just like a digression. We don't understand even that saying. Amar Rava, it doesn't mean both, either or. Hachikam, this is what he means. If you're nazir Torah, then you put it under the chatas. Nazir tameh, if you happen to be tameh, mishalech tachal adejel asham, and you send it under the asham, yatzav yaitz. So how do you know you have this additional step of taking the gravy from the shlamim and putting it into the hair? Amar Rabba says, Rabba, Amar cross the wording of the pasuk. Which pasuk? The pasuk says, you get a haircut, you bring it with Pesach Moed, and then you take the hair of the nazir and you place it on the fire, tachas zevach hashlamim. The word zevach is extra. Just say tachas hashlamim. We're talking about the kabbanas. Mezivcha yehei tachtav. That means we want to take the word zevach and put it, the first part of the pasuk, tachas, beneath zevach, have the carbon also underneath the shlamim. What do you mean have the carbon underneath? In the hair, you're going to mix in that gravy. And if you sent it, now the next thing is, it says if you did it not a shlamim, even though the pasuk clearly, what does the pasuk say? Tachas zevach shlamim. How can you come along and say, but if you did it under the chatas, it's good enough? When the Torah clearly says you should place the hair under the shlamim, again we can learn from the word zevach. Mike Amakra says zevach le is the chatas. The word zevach is superfluous. It could have just said shlamim. Zevach means and any other carbon. You know, either shlamim or zevach, any other carbon that you brought. For example, chatas, or if you brought an asham. So, how can you use one word to teach you two things? But if you just word the zevach, tell you that part of the shlamim is underneath the shlamim. But it's for the gravy. And now you tell me the word zevach is coming to teach you that even other kabbanas, for example, the chatas and the asham. Im case, if so, no, you know why? How can we learn two things in one pasuk? Because in Cain, if only come to teach you one thing, lame a crow. Why didn't the Torah clearly say Mereitiv Hashlamim? Just say, why have to be speaking code? Just tell us. And put it on the fire. Shetachas Mereitiv Hashlamim or Mereitiv Hashlamim. Why use the word Zevach? To teach you two things. My Zevach, Shema, I'm going to teach you two things. First of all, we want part of the shlamim to be underneath the gravy, and we want that any other carbon, if you place it here underneath, that's good enough. The Rabbi's Chatas Rashi says, no, maybe if I can't, maybe Zevach is only limited to teach you that you place it under a Chatas Nashim is good enough. How do you know to teach you about gravy? The Ema, cool, the Chatas Nashim with us. In Kenu, so, Lema Shlamim the Zevach. Let us say Shlamim and Zevach. My Zevach HaShlamim. What is a Zevach HaShlamim? Shema Minotarti comes to teach you two things, right? Because Shlamim viz Zevach, then you know it means clearly. So by being a little bit cryptic here and saying Zevach Shlamim, we learn two things from. Tell them what we learned. Everyone would send their what our Mishnah says. Everyone will have three opinions. Everyone, according to the first opinion, is Meir, who says that everybody would send a hair in except the one who was Tamei, who lived outside the Shlaim. Everyone would send a hair to the base of Mikdash to be cooked under the fire and under the Shlamim. Chutz mit Tamei shegilach medina. If you were Tamei and you took a haircut outside the Shhlaim, mipnei shesarei nikfer. Why not? Because his hair would be buried instead of being sent to. Taisus says, I have no idea where the Gemara gets this from. In fact, Taisus says it twice, in case we forgot the first time. Taisus says in one place it's 4 lines about him, then he says it again a bit further down. Sorry, he said 4 lines at the bottom, and then 4 lines above that, he says the same thing. He says, Avokoshim and all the nikveh v'tzorchin. He says it 6 lines in the middle wide lines. He says, how does the Gemara know you have to bury the hair and v'tzorchin? Really got to look into it. And then 4 lines later, Taisus says the same thing again. We have no idea how do you know that. Why it says that's repeating himself twice, but obviously it bothered him a lot. It's a new din that you have to bury your hair. Where does it Torah at all allude to that a tummy has to bury his hair? Where does burying come from? It remains the question. Says the Gemara. So that's the view of Rameh, which is exactly like our Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda says, and this is a new opinion we don't have in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah, so Rameh says, everyone here except the one who's Tamei outside Yerushalayim. Chacham say nobody sent the hearing except if you were in Yerushalayim and your Torah. And Rabbi Yehuda says no, nothing to do with where you were. It depends if you were a Torah Nazir or a Tamei Nazir. Rabbi Yehuda says Tahirim, if you were Torah Nazir, then can be Kanei Mishach. I don't care where you live, you need to send your hearing, like the Torah says. But Tameim, it's a different kind of haircut altogether. The haircut the Tamei is not to fulfill the mitzvah of the Naziris, it's to be able to start again, and and with a new crop of hair. So Tameim can be Kanei Mishach. Nobody sends him, and the Chachamim say Hakol loy hayim Mishachin. Chachamim say like our Mishnah. Hakol loy Mishachin. Nobody sent it in. Chutzman HaTorah maybe not mitzvah. Exactly. In Yerushalayim, they send it in. Mishnah. Next part. They would then cook the shlamim. We'll just do the Mishnah. They cook the shlamim. Oy sholkon. Now, interesting. What does sholik mean? Usually, we translate sholik means to stew, to cook a lot. But just to show you, there's an argument. You see right here again. Rashi says oy sholkon. Rashi says she'einay mevushul yaf. It's not cooked properly. Shulchan means par cooked. So you have par baked, you have par cooked. Cooked less than normal. That's what Rashi clearly says here. And Tosha says, Shulchan, he says, bishul yaisim stew. So there's an argument, generally speaking, whenever we find the word bishul or sholok, what does sholok mean? Stew or means?
Normally when you say slokis, you mention things that are boiled to the point that they break
that,
down.
That means stew.
Like
overcooked.
a thick soup or something.
Exactly, overcooked. Comes mush. Says the Mishnah further. So what do you do now? Noitel es hazroya b'sheila min ayil. You will take. We'll see later on exactly what do we do. You take the foreleg. Normally a kohen takes matanas, takes the chazei b'sheik, the hind leg. Here by a nazir, the kohen also takes the foreleg that is cooked from the ram. So he takes an extra piece. And the challah matzah achas, he takes one. There's two. Usually by a carbon taida, we learned that 3 kinds of matzahs and 1 kind of chametz. Here by a nazir, there are 2 kinds of matzahs. So he takes one matzah from the basket, and then the rokik matzah achas. He takes the 2 kinds of matzah, 1 matzah of each. The noisin al kape and nazir, he places them on the hand of the nazir, umanifin, and he waves it. And after you do that, the nazir is permitted to drink wine with a tamil mason. And to do, in other words, it seems to me, as most trying to learn, it seems that this opinion holds. The kohen cannot go ahead and start drinking. The nazir cannot proceed to start drinking wine until he does everything. He does all the kabbanas, and he took care of his hair. Only after he did that, then he can go ahead. Rab Shimon says, no. Even he just brought 1 carbon. According to the first opinion, the way we understood, you have to do all the kabbanas, the haircuts, then you can start doing the drinking the wine, Tamei Mason. Rab Shimon says, as soon as they sprinkled the blood of even just 1 carbon on you, you didn't do anything, just 1 carbon, you can already go ahead and you're ready to the rest you have to do for whatever reason, but you already are no longer a nazir, so you're permitted to drink wine and mitam mason. So that's the 2 opinions of the Mishnah. I think tomorrow will explain where they got these opinions from. Okay, have a good day, everybody.